Good evening to one and all. I, Dr. Annapurna, take this privilege to introduce Dr. Vidya Janalagada, our resource person for the next technical session. She is a very effective speaker, and we have enjoyed your session, ma'am, on making biology learning relevant to the students, which was held on 28th October. Dr. Vidya Janalagada has around 40 years of experience as a biology researcher and teacher. She obtained her PhD from University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and has worked on research projects at Indian Institute of Science, Fox Chase Cancer Center, Philadelphia, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad, Osmania University, and MIT. She has taught genetics, molecular biology, virology, immunology at undergraduate and postgraduate level. At present, she is MD and site head for Arcus Therapeutics, a startup company providing research support in immunology and oncology. We welcome you, Vidya ma'am, and request you to take over the session on rubrics, tools for making learning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Annapurna. Please, can you let me share my screen so that I can... So what is a rubric? It's not like a complicated word, but it is simply a kind of a guide, right? A guide that we ourselves make to help us in grading or understanding student output. Okay, so in technical terms, it's just a set of terms that we have decided or based on which we are going to give marks to a paper or a project or some other activity. It could be a lecture or a presentation by a student. Okay, so that who needs it? So definitely we need it as teachers because it reduces the time spent that we spend in doing the grading, and also we have sometimes hundreds of papers. So by the time you have reached the 50th paper, you forgot how you were giving marks on the first paper. So making this a guide for yourself makes it very objective and consistent, and also it lets you help others or ask them to help you, because no matter how many people share in the grading, they are all going to give the same kind of marks, right? And often students complain that that some teacher is partial or some teacher is unfair, and by telling the student what the rubric is, that complaint is reduced. And also it gives you a quick assessment where in which areas the class is doing well and in which areas the class is not doing so well, and you require to take some remedial action. Okay. And who needs a rubric? Of course, the students also need a rubric, because sometimes when you say, okay, give me an essay on something, they don't know what to write. Or if you say, do a project or make a poster on something, they don't know what to do. So if you give a list of items that you are going to grade them on, then they know, okay, my assignment should cover all these various topics. So to understand exactly what they are supposed to do. And like I said, from the student side, this anxiety about favoritism is gone. And they also know, like, why am I studying this subject? I'm studying this subject so that I can do this kind of work, which is the list of objectives listed in the assignment. Okay. And not only that, a little later in the talk, I hope we will see how we can ask the students to use a rubric to self-assess their own strengths and areas where they need to put in more effort, right? And finally, it helps the teacher and the student to discuss some specific topic where they are weak, instead of just saying, work harder, you are not doing enough, which is very vague, and the student doesn't know what it is that they're supposed to do. If we say, like, look, you are not able to do this calculation, or your English is weak, you need to pay attention to the grammar. So those things make for much better feedback compared to a general kind of a statement on their performance. Okay, so a little cartoon that I saw, I thought it was good. So here's a teacher saying, like, rubrics, I never give my students rubrics because that's like cheating. It's like telling them it's as good as me writing their assignment for them. And some teachers feel like college students, they should understand what they're expected to do. Okay, so the point of learning is to keep them in some kind of a suspense about it, so that they will all keep working harder, and they will not feel like, okay, I've completed the work. And so sometimes being stressed is good because it motivates people to work harder, right? But of course, the real reason is this, because the teacher hasn't herself or himself thought about how they're going to grade. So, it's based on their mood. And many studies have shown this too, right? Not only for teachers, but even for judges, that the judgment that the judges give, or the sentences that they give, depends on the time of the day. So in the morning, when they're full of energy, maybe they want to give a slightly harder judgment, or slightly less marks. But by the end of the day, when they're so tired, they're not reading or they're not listening properly, they are more lenient, right? So to remove this kind of arbitrariness in grading, it is very good to have a rubric. And the good thing is, you need to do it only once. Like, you make the rubric once, and then you can use the same rubric for various assignments. So people say there are two types of rubrics. One is holistic, like the whole, you just look at the whole body of work, whatever it is, just take, and then you decide whether it is worth a grade or a B grade, or 90 marks or 60 marks, whatever, right? So it's very quick to do that. You don't have to work. You just look at it, and you have some kind of a gut reaction, or you have some kind of a professional assessment for the overall performance. So you give the grade, but the problem is you cannot give specific feedback. So compared to that, analytic rubric, where you have listed particular facets of the work that you are going to examine, right? It takes time to make it, because you have to work on it. But then once you're done, you can give very, very specific feedback, and you can decide which aspects are more valuable in that particular assignment. So we'll take an example of both of these types of rubrics. So let's say I want to make a rubric. What do I need, right? I need to first know what it is that I'm testing, right? Am I testing the students' writing skills, drawing skills, analytical skills, what it is? And then how will I know that they are doing okay or excellent, or how will I know what they are doing, right? And so that you need to set a criteria as well as a level. And in the next slide, we'll see how that works, right? Also, we need to describe what is each level. So here it is. So we have already all used rubrics. I'm sure all of you have judged some kind of competition. Let's say there's an essay competition now I have for my students, which says write an essay on online education. So maybe I want to give marks on these 5 points, right? How well is the introduction? Have they given examples of advantages and disadvantages? Have they summarized it as a final verdict, and how well they have written it? And if this, instead of the essay competition, if I have people going to speak on this, right? So then now the things that I'm going to base it on is, of course, the introduction, how well they relate to the topic, how well they present their argument. But I will talk about, are they confident in speaking? When they're using how was their body language? How was their pronunciation or voice? And did they finish in time? So those might be some things that we might look for. And if the same topic is now, I have asked people to make a poster on this, right? So then I might have completely different guidelines on which I'm going to give marks for this poster. Of course, the material matters, but when they are presenting, could they answer my questions that as a presentation? And how was the graphics? Did they have good pictures on their poster? How was the text on their poster, right? And overall, was the poster balanced? Was it looking attractive, right? So some marks. I'm not saying that we'll give equal marks to all this. I'm saying that we will try to grade a person on at least these 5 or maybe more, whatever you feel is important, right? So it is good to have a guideline, so that when you see many students' performance, you are judging them all by the same criteria. Okay, so I'll talk about how to make assessment rubric because I think they are more valuable. So it's simply you just have to make a table. All the rows are the levels of achievement and the columns are the areas of achievement. I think I have switched this. I'm sorry. Let's see this, right? So actually the rows are the areas. So let's say I have to judge somebody's experiment. How did they do it? So I think, okay, I'm going to look at the procedure, look at their observations, and then look at how they have done some calculations. Let's say it's a titration. So I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to grade only 3. It's bad or average or good. Okay. So having made this table, now I need to put the descriptors. Okay. So I'm going to say, okay, if the procedure is missing 1 or more steps, then I'm going to say it poor, and maybe poor gets 2 marks, right? If nothing is missing, the procedure is written well, then I'm going to call it average. Maybe they get 5 marks, right? But some person has not only nothing missing, but they have actually explained why we are doing this procedure the way we are doing it. Then maybe I want to give them 7 marks. Okay. Similarly, observations, you are supposed to take some observations. You only took 2 instead of 3. Okay, then that's not good. Maybe you took all 3 observations, but they were not accurate. There's too much variation. Then it's average. So you get little more marks than poor, but not as much as the person who has made all observations and very accurately. And same. So for the calculations, right? So I can decide what I'm going to look for. And so now when I'm looking at people's papers, it's really easy to give these marks in this particular format. Okay. So you can design a rubric for any activity. And here is a rubric I designed to, like, let's say we have all gone for a walk. So I'm going to now tell you how good your walk was. We just walked in the park and came back. And so I'm going to say, did you notice any plants, right? At least 1, but maybe 3 plants. So you can give some marks for that. And okay, you saw the plants, maybe you saw a rose bush, maybe you saw a peepal tree. Do you know the botanical name? Do you know their family? Let's say, do you know something of economic importance or medicinal value of these plants? So if you have gone beyond just looking at the plant, but thought about something which is a deeper biological property of the plant, well, you get some more marks for this. Maybe you noticed some animals there. Maybe there were caterpillars or grasshoppers or something that you noticed, ants. Okay, so that's great. Then maybe you noticed there was some area which is not good. Maybe there was a trash heap there, or there was a deep ditch there or something like that. No, it's not really pretty. The park is good, but there's some area where all the plants have died, maybe, right? So if you have noted that too, well, then you get some more marks for your nature walk. And then if you can think of a way to solve that problem, like why are some plants dying there? Maybe it's a parasite, maybe it's a lack of sunshine, maybe it's lack of water, maybe they are incompatible species putting together, so they are not well suited to grow together. Well, if you have thought about some solution to this, like let's do this, that's great. You get some more marks. And then finally, if you actually have proposed a viable plan, like in 3 months time, we can do all this with this much amount of money, and with these steps, we can remove this problem area from that park. Well, then you get some more points, right? So my aim here is to tell you that if you think deeply, not even very deeply, but just a little bit deeply about any activity that you and your students are doing, you can convert it into a rubric, and you can give credit to the students for doing this particular activity, right? Even a simple activity is just like walking in the parking lot of the college, right? So here are 2 samples that I picked up from this website, which is listed here. And I want to say that after this is over, I will share all these slides with you. So if you like, you can go to the website and read more about it. So here is an example of a holistic report. So students are supposed to give a report about, let's say, Telangana, what's great about Telangana, right? So, and I have decided that if there is not really very good information given. There wasn't a good slide, wasn't that good, and the student wasn't talking that well. He was just looking at the slide and reading the slide. Voice was not confident. Then I'm going to give 0 points. Let's say I'm really strict, right? And so on. If the student, for example, has presented lots of information, everything is correct, it's beautiful figures that they have put, and the student is a good speaker, confident speaker, and it was, it was interesting, then I'm going to give them 3 points, let's say, right? So you can do this. So you have already decided how you are going to give the points, right? A much better way, in my view, instead of a holistic rubric, is to have a analytical rubric. So it's the same thing, right? But we were looking at 3 things, like we were looking at what facts they are presenting, what graphics they are presenting, and how they are presenting. And now I have separated it into 3. So it's a 3x3 grid. And so now maybe there might be some person who gave all facts very well, but was not speaking that well, right? So you give full marks for the facts, but you give low marks for the last criteria, which is not speaking that well. And when you're talking to the student, you can tell the student, like, see, you need to improve your confidence level or presentation skill, or you need to speak loudly, whatever it is, right? Or on the other hand, there might be somebody who gave good information, like the satisfactory information, but their visual was really stunning and beautiful, right? And they made it themselves, they have not just copied it from some internet source. So then you can give them medium points on the information, but high points for the artwork. Okay, so making a good rubric, don't make it too big, because then I think 3 levels is good, 3 to 5 levels is good. Then you can really give the marks in a very fair and consistent manner. So this is an example I had done long ago for how to make a rubric for project work. Different students have done different projects, right? So now how do you give them kind of a uniform basis for awarding? So I had talked this with my other friends. So let's say there are 10 students in your class, and one person went and analyzed water samples, one person optimized conditions to grow earthworms and supply them to some nursery. One person bought a bunch of Coke and Fanta and whatever, and found out how much sugar was there and made a poster out of it. Some person just read what you're going to teach, that's their project, that they have just read it before class, right? Another person read a number of papers and actually wrote a little review on it. The one person came and said, like, I just watched a beautiful TED review or something on this topic. That was their project, okay? Some person just read one paper, but then he gave a little talk about it, and so on, right? So some person went to a non-syllabus talk. They attended a talk in their neighborhood, some other place, right? And they came and said, I attended that talk, and so on, right? So now, how do you think these are good? So I had asked a bunch of teachers, like about 100 teachers, to say whether they think that this is a good project or bad project. And then these are the results they gave, right? So like 90% of the people thought analyzing water was a good project, and only 48% people thought that the student who had read the chapter in the textbook before he came to class had done a good project. Okay, so but this is all very subjective. It depends on whether I like lab work, or whether I think library work is more important, or whether I think like this water sample is a very simple procedure, it's not important, whereas the sugar one was a more difficult procedure, so that person has done more work. So I think a better way is to judge based on rubrics, like what do we want the project to have? The project should have these things, right? For example, I put 5 things on top. It should require the student to be involved in the work. It might require some lab work where they have to actually be in a lab. It might require some library work. It might require some thinking on their own part to derive some a good conclusion out of their work, right? And I say I also need the student to communicate. So if I make this rubric, and now I have all these different activities which different students have done, then I can put like this, right? So for example, let's take the analysis water sample, which here I have put it in the end, right? Which most teachers thought, 90% of the teachers thought was an excellent project, analyzing water samples. But when I look at it, I see, yes, student was involved. They were actively doing something, right? And it also required lab work. Yes, but they didn't do it's not really required for them to do reference work. They can just present their results, and they have just done the work. They haven't written a report on it, so that's not really good, right? On the other hand, a person who read the dozen papers, which is somewhere here, right? So yes, it required reading, whereas watching a video or attending a talk was passive, right? They didn't go to the lab, but they have done a lot of library work. They had to digest all that material, and they had to actually bring out some output, right? So my point is, you think for yourself, what are your goals that you want the students to accomplish, and make a rubric like this, so that once you have made it, you can actually share it with the students too, right? So before we go to the sharing part, so what do we need to know? So you need to be clear, what is it that you're going to assess, right? The writing or the speaking or the answering or whatever it is. Being in lab, understanding why they're in the lab, why are they doing this. So whatever it is that you want the student to accomplish, put it as your criteria for assessment, right? And then for each achievement that you want, you put 3 levels, or maybe at the most 4 or 5 levels. We don't make too many, and then keep the scoring also simple: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Sometimes if you say out of 10, it's really hard to know what is the difference between 6 and 7, or what's the difference between 6 and 8. It becomes very subjective. So the whole point of the rubric is to make grading quite systematic and objective, so that anyone who views this output can give more or less the same grade. Okay. And I'm also going to say that the following this rubrics, everyone talks about we have to teach our students critical thinking, we have to teach the students critical thinking, but who is going to teach them, and with what topic, right? So this is great. Like you do this exercise with your students, go ask them if they like the movie, and half will say yes and half will say no, right? But then this is just like a holistic rubric, and you haven't learned anything about it, and you haven't asked the student to think about the movie in deeper detail. But you could ask something like that, like, why did you like this movie, right? Did you like the plot? Did you like the music? How good was the acting? What was the dialogue good and powerful, right? Did it have a good social message? So once we have dissected it, I've just put 5 things. Like once we ask the students to give opinions on these 5 various aspects of this movie, or it could be a video, or it could be a lecture that they have attended. So now in their minds, they start thinking about it. It's not just like, yeah, this is great, or no, this isn't great, but they're actually thinking like, the plot wasn't that good, but the acting was awesome, or the music wasn't so good, but the dialogues were very good, whatever it is, right? So it gives this critical thinking simply means you are considering a particular narrow aspect of something, and then you are deciding on the value of that, or the merit of that particular aspect. Okay, so what I said is to ask the students to assess themselves, and that is the best thing, because unless the student is aware of their own weaknesses, they are not going to put in the effort in the right direction. Okay, so tell the students, okay, this is the assignment. Let's say you have asked them to write about the mitochondrial electron transport chain. So now make what do you think we should grade you on, right? So make their own as the rubric. Okay, then you have your own rubric. So you show your rubric to the student. The student has his own rubric. So if they feel, you see where it overlaps, right? And so you explain why you are testing these achievements. Okay. So before they start the assignment, so because when they start the assignment, they know that they have to hit all the spots in this rubric. And once the assignment is given, the student can use your rubric to assess their own efforts, or you can do this. You can give the report to their neighbors and say you assess it. This can be not just for a written assignment, because many students have to give seminar, and then you can ask everybody in the in the class to also grade the seminar based on the rubric that you have given, right? So they also pay attention to the seminar because they are supposed to give scores to this seminar. And at the end, you can see whether they are judging correctly or not. Okay, whether they are simply giving good marks to their friends because they like their friends. So compare your assignment with the student's assessment, right? And again, you can explain to them, like, be careful. This isn't a, be professional about it. Don't give good marks just because you like this person or stuff like that. So making students think about their own work in terms of specific milestones that they have to meet is also a very good, very good foundation for becoming good researchers or becoming good students, becoming good learners. So of course, I'm going to end with a little joke here. So this teacher is so busy making rubrics. So even when the child says, like, I've drawn something, do you like what I drew? It's like, well, I have to make a rubric for it. Right? So we don't want to go to that extent, but definitely in our classroom, we need to use rubrics as much as possible. So I guess I'm going to end a little before time, so it gives people time to ask questions if you have any questions. I think rubrics are really valuable because you can put your expectations, right? What do you expect the students? Because many teachers, they complain that the students aren't doing well, they aren't putting in enough effort, they are not serious about their studies. But exactly what is it that they are not doing? So by putting down your expectations, you also make sure that when you're communicating with the students, you're stressing on those points, making them see the importance of those achievements. Okay. From the viewpoint of the student now understands exactly what they are supposed to do in the assignment, how long it should be, how, that whether it should have or not have diagrams, because you have said you should have at least one diagram or should have two diagrams, whether there should be equations, whether there should be energy calculations. I'm going with that mitochondrial electron transport chain, whether they should talk about use of inhibitors, whether they should talk of metabolic disorders which are related to the ETC, things like that. Right? And finally, I would say that it makes possible the discussion of the value of that assignment, right? Because why is the teacher asking me to write an essay on something, right? Why is she asking me to write an essay about, let's say, phenylketonuria? Why should I write that? And so because you have said you want some historical aspect, you want to maybe talk about how this gene was discovered, mapped, what is the sequence, what are the SNPs, what are the cures, or what are the treatments for PKU, right? Excellent, because that assignment becomes more than just somehow writing something on a piece of paper. And also this is an excellent way, because if you say you are going to give negative marks for copied stuff, right? Negative marks for plagiarized either from the internet or from each other, that also is a very good opportunity for you to make the students do their own work and not rely on somebody else's work. Okay, so this was a pretty short topic. There isn't much to tell about this because it is something that has to be practiced, and I hope you will try to make at least one rubric this year, right? For one something, make one rubric, and then if your colleagues are also share their own rubrics. So suddenly you have like 5, 7, 10 rubrics that you can use. The department has a rubric bank. So there's a rubric for posters, there's a rubric for assignments, speeches, whatever it is, that some activities that you're doing. Even, when they attend a guest lecture, it would be a good thing to ask the students to fill out assessment of the speaker, right? It's not to insult the speaker. It is not even to make the students feel that they are better than the speaker, but it is to analyze the speaker's presentation for what is the message that they got out of it. So even guest lectures, otherwise what happens, a class trip, right? Everyone wants to go for a class trip. That's the day where there will be no person absent. Everybody will be on time, and then you go to a lab or you go to a particular place that you're visiting, industry or something. And then that's it. Then it's done. So people sing songs while they're coming back in the bus, and then the whole thing is over, right? But what is it that they learned from it? So if you have a rubric for field trips, let's say, that would be great. Students are now, they have an impetus to think about what they gained from it, how valuable it was. And that is what we talk about critical thinking, is that you are not just passively accepting everything that is happening around you, but you're actually not in a bad way, but in a good way, judging the value of what it is that you're observing or what it is that you're experiencing. And that way you can make good choices, right? Because you know that I liked this thing which was very good about this talk. So when you are going to talk, you are trying to go do that good thing which you thought was interesting to you, right? So that's all I have for now. And
Ma'am, Vidya ma'am,
yeah.
I was just wondering, can we make common rubric tools for general things like you're saying field trips?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I mean, that's why I say I want each teacher to just make one rubric, but make sure you're not working on the same thing. And so just, you know, in the space of 1 week, let's say, you think carefully about it. And once you make it, you discuss with your colleague. In the space of 1 week, you have a rubric for 15, whatever different things, right?
Yes.
And that's good. And it's a departmental treasure, because, and it also different
And it
departments can
remains.
cooperate, and you have a wonderful resource. So every time, every time you have to do it, people are not struggling to decide how to evaluate something.
Yes.
And also to involve the students, right, in every activity, because this is what happens. I have seen there's a guest lecture, students come to the lecture, they're kind of just sitting there, and then the lecture is over, and then that's it. So it can be more than that. You can derive more value from it by asking a follow-on activity from that lecture from the students, right? Ask the students to make it could be a team. You don't want to have, dozens and dozens of assignments to grade or output to grade. So you make a team of 4 or 3 or whatever. So you have cut down your assignment grading. And when we are talking about continual assignments, this is the wonderful way to have continual continual assessment, because you're seeing how engaged the student is, how prepared they are to receive various kinds of experiences and inputs.
And also, as you suggested, you ask the students to make their own rubric.
Yeah.
It would be interesting in terms of a lot of inputs will come from their point of view.
Yeah. So things that they think are important, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't think they're important, and maybe you can explain to them why it is
from
not
a
that
different
important.
point of view, they will give a lot of other inputs,
Right.
which is required.
And
So
also many of your students may become teachers, so you are empowering them in their future profession.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. That's a good idea. I mean, actually, would like to implement in my this thing right away. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Ma. I'm happy to hear this.
Thank you, Vidya ma'am. Thank you for the elaborate and great session. We have one question in the chat box. Can rubrics assure 100% assessment?
So, when we look at MCQs, which people like a lot, right? The multiple choice questions, it is kind of a rubric, right? If you answer any of the 3 or 4 wrong answers, you get 0 marks. But if you answer the correct answer, you get 1 mark, let's say, right? So that is, we don't call it, but it is actually a rubric, because we have decided this is correct. So there are only 2 levels, right? 0 and 1. If you get it right, you get 1 mark. If you get it wrong, you get a 0 mark. Or if you want to give negative marking, that's up to you. Then when we look at fill in the blanks, right, that is something which is a rubric where you can give full marks, partial marks, or no marks. Let's say somebody gives an answer which is somewhat okay in the fill in the blanks. So you're going to give them some marks, but not full marks, right? And when it comes to longer questions, essay type questions, it is really hard to make a rubric, because everything is not this objective type, right? But even so, people do look for keywords. So you can have a rubric saying like you should have the, let's say I've asked a thing about Mendel's laws. Have they defined the law correctly? You give some marks, right? Have they given one example? You give one more mark. So it is possible to have a rough rubric about it, so that, like I said, paper to paper you have consistency, and you can also put some negative marks there, because if they have written something like absurd or completely wrong, that the concept is wrong, or they have misinterpreted something, then if you have noted it in your award sheet as a negative thing, right? So when you talk to that student, you can tell them like, look, this, you have a misconception. This is not how it works. Oftentimes we can't remember which student made this error, and help that student to overcome that. So yes, a rubric can be made for various types of activities. It is easiest for shorter answers. It is harder to write it for longer answers. But like I showed you, even for a project, many times you have a competition where people present their projects, right? So people present their work paper or a poster. How do you judge it, right? So one is the poster itself and one is the talk itself, but one is the value of the work. How do you decide which project challenge the student more? And so having a rubric for that and explaining it to the student, like you're going to be marked on these things, right? Whether you did library work, whether you did mathematical work, whether you did computational work, there can be many things. And so a student who knows this and tries to incorporate all these various aspects into their project will definitely have a nicer project, because they have worked on various things, and so those who are not getting, let's say, very high marks in that competition don't feel that people didn't appreciate their project. That's because you got maximum you could in a particular category, but in other categories you were deficient. So somebody who did a little bit in everything may still have a richer experience than somebody who did only one thing in great detail, right? So what is it that you value in your student? Basically, what is the achievement that you want the student to make, and then you have the rubric reflecting your expectations of that achievement.
Ma'am, I think this also partly explains our next question. A course has 4 learning outcomes. Will it be possible to cover all the aspects in rubrics?
Yeah, definitely, right? But I would say don't make all of them written assignments. That is it's tough for the students. Make one, like I have found this a very interesting thing. I tell the students to make a quiz, like a multiple choice, like 5 questions, set 5 questions from this topic, right? And look at their questions. Are their questions good, right? So you can say if the questions are all like that, you have to set 5 questions. If all 5 are good, you get 5 marks. If one is good, you get 1 mark. So on. So right, it could be a poster that they have to make. It could be a short talk which they have to make, or it could be a very nice activities to write a bunch. Have the students write a bunch of questions on chits and put all the chits in a jar, and you have yourself written some questions. So now there's 25 chits in there, and then a student picks up, that's their luck, they pick up the chit. If they answer the question, they get some marks. If they can't answer that question, you pass it to the next person, who, if they answer it, they get the marks, and they have additional chance to answer their own chit as well, right? This creates great fun in the class. And then this thing, otherwise what happens, some students who are bold and they monopolize the class time. They give all the answers, and some students just don't want to answer at all. But in this way, every student has to answer some question. Some of them may be posed by their own students, by their own classmates. You don't know which question you'll get, and some questions are posed by the teacher. That would be such a good activity. So in that particular learning objective, course objective, your objective is to ask questions about some important concepts or practices in that particular of that objective, and then give the students some grade for it. And the continual assessment is so good, because and this did not take up a whole class, right? This can be just 20 minutes of the class. And so, or something can be homework, like make 5 questions and bring it. But if they are plagiarized questions, no, you're not going to get any marks.
Ma'am, our next question is, can we use rubrics as one of the sources to identify the needs in the courses?
I think a feedback form is better for this. Like you can have a feedback form saying after every unit or after every half unit, asking students which topics, like you pick a thing of topics, let's say you've taught 5 topics, and then you ask them to rate a topic as, clear, unclear, doubtful, very interesting, not interesting, something, right? So then like I said, the teacher gets a snapshot of what this class is doing, because if you get most of this feedback form, which is in the form of a rubric, because they have to tick certain times, and it can be a Google form, because you instantly get the output without you having to tabulate all the results. So you see which topic students have liked a lot, which topic students are struggling, and then you can devote 1 or 2 remedial classes for that particular topic.
Thank you, ma'am, for your patience. I think you have been with us for more than 2 hours.
And I have been attending other sessions too, as much as I could. They were all excellent. It's really nice. Very nicely set up workshop. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this great session. Rubrics, as we understand, is used to coordinate between the assessment and instructions. You have given us a detailed insight about the types of rubrics, what is required to create a rubrics, structure of assessment rubrics, and how to design it, and what is the key to making a good rubrics, and how the students can use it for the self-assessment. And so friends, now anyway, we have skill tests, so we can apply this to the various skill tests like poster presentations, models. And thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you once again. So dear participants.
Bye everyone. All the best.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your inputs that you have given for our workshop. It was really wonderful having you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ma. Bye. Namaste.